started. And also the recording came late because for some reason Zoom couldn't process the video. And then I left for the trip and I couldn't deal with it till today. So just the way life rolls. But you guys, thank you for joining us and having fun with us. So this next little bit that we're going to chat about today, we're starting with chapter 25, which is we have learned about Beatrice and Calixta, and we've had the curse and all of this. And the last thing that we saw before in those last chapters was after the curse and Calixta had left with the grackles, Greta and Gertie were walking back to Mage Guild Hall, and they see a commotion going on the steps, and they learn that Ravel, the high mage, was murdered and his leg was amputated. And for what we've been reading in the story, we know that dark magic cannot happen without mutilation or death. And so we know that the Ravenclaw staff is a Ravenclaw. So the logical assumption is that this claw on the staff is the claw that might have been amputated from the high mage Ravel, who had been missing for 2 days and was found murdered in the guild hall library outside in the foyer area. So that was big drama. And then we leave that drama and now we go back to Lizzy, who is waking up in Igre's place on the morning after they arrive. And so Igre's, they're greeting, and they have one of the fun things there, a cat that's in the front of that chapter, is that Lizzy believes that she's back home. She's once again dreaming that she's back home.
Right.
And then she wakes up and realizes, no, she's not. She's in this sort of a cave-like dwelling house that's really beautifully appointed. And Dougal smells something, and they go into breakfast, and they're going to have truffles. And this is where the little kind of funny comic relief happens, where Igre and Greta are talking about who has the best truffles. And Igre must have won a competition many, many years ago. So he has a plaque and all of that. So we're bringing the truffles back into the mix. But we get into this. This is really kind of where we had to start pulling stuff together. You've now basically met most of the main characters in the story. There's a few incidental things that happen, but you've met the main characters, and it's going to be weaving these chapters now together for us. That was really important. In the portrait, we have Igre the High Mage, we have Burton, who's a bear, and Lizzy's like, how do you even... bears are mean, and they're like, no, he's a pussy cat. He's just great. And then we describe Gorva with the long silver hair, and hopefully the readers will then put that two together, because Beatrice went to the apothecary to meet Gorva to try to have a child. So Gorva's in the picture. And then we just got through learning about Ravel. So the reader knows what happened to Ravel, but Lizzy doesn't. They hide that piece of information from her. And then the last one in the picture is Cedric. And there's only a couple of references. I mean, in the first time Lizzy sees a guy with a monocle, and the monocle is mentioned way back when the barber comes to give them their beard cuts and haircuts. And so we learn that he becomes king, and then also that his wife died and that he was really sad. And Lizzy starts putting two and two together, that his wife was one of the ice angels. So this is where it's all starting to come back together finally, or stirring together, but it's not really. But that is the chapter that kind of sets up who these characters are, how they're related to Igre, only the fact that in this portrait, they're part of his count.
I thought that was a really fun way to summarize characters of the plot through a portrait. I thought that was super clever, Ricky's idea. Loved that, and loved the idea that the reader was in on something that our character is not. And they're privy to something that she is not, and they know something, and they're waiting for it to be revealed to her in some kind of way. So
That's, yeah,
Really fun tools.
and the fact that Lizzy has made a connection with these ice angels, and
Yeah,
Lizzy likes to be a singer, wants to perform and all of that. So that's the Cat part that I wanted to kind of keep in there, because Cat wanted to sing and dance in the attic and so forth. And there
yeah,
were actually times when, I mean, we talked about how do we make music be a bigger part of this.
yes,
And my thing, I mean, we didn't argue about it. It's just my thing is I wanted it to be really plausible. Again, I wanted it to have a reason and a place. And so I'm kind of glad that that place came from the Ice Angels, because
mhm,
that they become a big deal in the whole kingdom. And so it didn't end up being Lizzy, but it certainly relates to Lizzy and what she would like to do as being a performer or being an actress or something like that.
exactly.
And then so they have, so Lizzy agrees. If you will just promise that I can go back home, I will keep going.
Right.
And she's also like, this dream is bigger than any dream I've ever had, but it's still not horrible. And I'm not scared. So let me keep going.
Right.
So that's the other device that keeps us pushing forward, is that Lizzy thinks that she's dreaming. And there's lots of reasons why she should. But then they take off through the Valendale Forest and they head to Bag Road, and it's really dank and starting to get foggy. And Lizzy doesn't like the fog because it. I mean, I wanted to create a kind of an ominous feel, not just the trees and the thickness of the trees, but fog is such a cloak. I'm even driving here to Texas the other day. I was going through a fog that was so incredibly dense that I could barely see in front of me. And even like if the truck is curving on a little dirt road, I'm like, I'm slowing way down because I can't see it. So there's this kind of closing in of everything using the fog as a thing. And then we hear the trickle, trickle of the future falls. And I don't know, Kat, if you would like to just chat a little bit about the future falls and what they see or any of that, but I'll let you take it away for a second.
Well, I love the imagery that from all of the travels that they go on, and I do think that symbolically, like you were just talking about fog, you have to slow down. You have to slow down, reconsider your strategy, figure out ways so that you can be seen or not, or that you can see, or So to me, the symbolism of that was really beautiful. I thought that was a perfect place to put that.
And the fact that you can't see any more into the future,
Right.
your far sight is now limited. You
Limited.
kind of only get what's in the moment, and you don't see what's so far ahead.
Exactly.
And so there is a little bit of that. When each of them look into the falls, of course, Ravel says he can't see anything. Um,
Right.
and then Lizzy, she sees something that we never fully explain other than it was the attic and what she's already experienced. But it really has to do with the last chapter of the book, to be honest. And McDougal yips because he sees himself falling off of a black bird. That is something that we may address in the next talk, because it relates to something that happens a little bit later. But that was also a piece of the puzzle. When I wrote it in the story, I expected it to be a bigger thing later. And it didn't happen that way, but I decided to leave that in there because it could happen in a sequel. Da 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 da. And then Greta is the one that is the biggest surprise, because she's like, oh my God, I saw myself going to your attic. So they all saw stuff in the falls. And now, just as they're starting to leave in this cloak and this veil of fog, they hear the caw of a raven. And it's very close and it flutters away. And now there's a great fear that because Calixta's eyes are Omen the Raven, that they have been spotted, that they are in great peril, and they must get to Anza. And they've got to go through the Foggy Flats and the Merry Meadows and get over to the Fish Market Road so that they can get into the city of Anza. They feel like when they get into Anza, they're going to be much safer. And so we leave the reader with that when that happens. And then when we next come back, we jump over to Molly. Oh, I think I see her coming. Oh, I think she's bad. Look, can you see, Mom? Is that her? She's gonna come. It's like, stop! You're gonna explode your feathers. And while we have always thought that Molly was not in control of her feathers, and she's not, because they can go accidentally off. This whole situation with Molly's feathers is something that she developed while she was in maid school as a distraction technique. And while she can use it as a distraction technique, they will go off accidentally. And if you really put two and two together, the first time her feathers go off, it's because Lizzy doesn't think she can go into the tiny little houses at Fiddler's Cove. And when Molly, because Molly and Greta catch eyes, when Molly shoots off her feather, they make it sound like it was an explosion, an accident. Oh, it really shouldn't have happened. But it was a way for Lizzy to be distracted from the task of going in. And as soon as that happened, Lizzy just walks in the door. It's back to, if you can believe you can do it, you can do it. And if you, and so forth. So we learn a little bit of stuff there. It doesn't last long, but it is critical pieces of information to still what is yet to come in the story. Now, in St. Murphy's Boulevard, this is when we finally see Anza for the first time from the ground. As a reader, you've seen it from the air, because they flew over it many chapters ago. But this is the first time that we describe the place as being buildings with slanted walls and outdoor plumbing or pipes that climb like vines of ivy outside the buildings. We get to understand the grandeur of Grace of the Moon Oratory, and that there's lots of vehicles traveling through the town and hustle and bustle. And we just really get a different picture for all of that. And that was fun for me to describe. And I don't really think I cognitively connected those structures to my little birdhouses that I built out at Autumn Rock. But my little birdhouses are all tilted, like this. There's like something quirky that goes in my mind. And so I kind of built the town. There was a part of me that not only wanted it to be steampunky and funky and all of that, but it also has a kind of a Dr. Seuss feel to it. It's just, it's just not all there. And I really thought that was kind of a fun thing. But there's the traffic jam. The traffic is getting slower. Lizzy's in her cloak because they've changed her back into her tunic with her cloak. So she is now looking like a mage. So she would be fitting right in as a little novice mage. The traffic jam happens. They see the grackles. There's suddenly a rush to Brackleton Park. And then suddenly Ivory dials in his message and realizes that Calixta has hacked the communication system and has sent out a message to everybody saying, "Meet me, Calixta the Witch, in Brackleton Park. I have got news for you." And that tactic works, and everybody is rushing to the park. And so much so that vehicles are being abandoned and the traffic jam. And now what are they going to do? Because they're almost to the guild hall. And they have no way of getting Lizzy there except now by foot. So Greta ends up flying on ahead. And then at the end of this chapter, after she's gone on ahead, we flip the page and Calixta is there in the park. The grackles are swarming. Omen is circling around. Omen makes a beeline for Ivory, Lizzy, and McDougal. They feel like they have been found out. Somehow or another, Omen knows this is them. Perhaps he saw them back at Future Falls. And after all of that takes place, he comes zooming at them and then woof, off he goes and doesn't stop, which is a little interesting because they really think that he saw them and recognized them.
Yeah.
And he makes the same kind of gesture elsewhere. And then after Calixta explains, I agree, probably brought her. She came on a goose. She's probably redheaded. She's probably a novice mage. Lizzie's like, oh my God, they're going to know me. And then they all know what I agree looks like because he's kangaroo and bat, but he's put on a pendant that Lizzie doesn't know is going to cloak him from other people recognizing him. And this was one of our devices, Kat.
Yeah.
It'll come up in this next chapter, but we had to figure out some ways to do some disguising for people. So this is the predecessor for something that's going to happen later. I agree, has a pendant of deception and disguise.
We already had the cloaks and we didn't want to revisit that. We didn't think that he could do a spell and create something that would, instantly bubble him in any way because it was a crowd and whatever. So yeah, it was a real challenge just to come up with some kind of magic that, yeah.
So Lizzie realizes, because people are not recognizing him, and they start going, and Calixta, after Calixta has said, describe Lizzie, oh my God, she's going to be discovered, all this, and she says, what are you waiting for? And she does this with her staff, and it starts this because the grackles swarm the crowd, and it starts mass pandemonium. There's a human stampede, and they're all dispersed. I agree, McDougal and Lizzie are all three completely separated in this stampede. And after everything they've done to get Lizzie to the Mage Guild Hall, and they're so close, this is where it's kind of like all hell breaks loose and they're all gone in their separate directions.
Yep.
Now that takes us to chapter 29, which is Back Alley Blues. And I'm still waiting for you to write that song, Kat, because that's just the Back Alley Blues. And before I talk about it, I want to pass this torch over to Kat, because I'm going to say this is my favorite chapter in the book. So.
Yeah, it's simple. It's a conversation that takes place between two people or two characters. And it's foreboding. I mean, there's just a lot of energy in it over one little scene. And you just think for sure, that feeling of being lost, that feeling of being found out, that feeling of you're in a dark place, in an alleyway. Alleyways always kind of conjure up that feeling, all those things. But I like the simplicity of it. It's a conversation.
It is. It's just a conversation, and it's the shortest chapter in the book, other than the prelude and interludes that just happen way at the beginning. I know in my brain, I wrote this book to be a movie. I wanted it to read like a movie. Mm-hmm. And right before it, we've had this stampede that's sort of dispersing. The people are moving. And I picture the people going down the main streets, going down the whatever, getting on. And maybe a few of them went down the alley. But when McDougal finally turns into the alley because he's tired or whatever, he's kind of alone.
Yeah.
And he's walking down these cobblestones. It is dark. We see the steps of the deliveries to the back doors coming down, and one of them has a light that's it's just humming, and I'm the where he stands there and he looks up and he goes, "The groomed goat, deliveries in rear." This is years later. This is something in the neighborhood of 65 or 70 years later from the groomed goat that we learned of way back when Cedric and Gethric were, because this is before Karina was born, right. And all of that. So it was years earlier. So we see this old paint on the brick wall and the light humming and buzzing, and McDougal is kind of slumped down on a step, and here comes flap, 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 flap. And landing on an awning across the way is Omen the Raven.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the conversation, Omen is so calm in his voice.
Yeah.
He's very, he asks questions, but nothing about him sounds sinister. We just know that he's Calixta's, main guy.
Right.
And through all of this, he goes, well, what do you mean you're going to protect the princess? And because that's all it's been tomfoolery since the beginning, and I was supposed to protect her and I didn't, and blah blah blah. And he just starts spilling the beans because he's so mad, and he totally confirms the suspicion that Omen had.
Right.
Omen has to find out, is this truly who I'm looking for Calixta? And the readers, I mean, a lot of people, if any of you are can comment on this, did you get to this scene and go, McDougal, shut up? Did anybody feel that at all? Because it's like he spills the beans, and Omen is pretty much, thanks so much, I appreciate it. Now, if you want to get to where you're going, because you've never been here, if you'll just go out to the main road, make a right, just go up the hill, you'll see exactly where you're supposed to go. So Karen Oliver, you chimed in and said, yep, is exactly what I felt. And so that, I don't know what I love about that chapter, except just the visual of it, the intimacy of it, and that one conversation. But it is one of my favorite chapters in the book. And then we come back to Ivy, and he is like, I'm trying to go in the direction he thinks he should go. He's going to text. He's going to text a message saying, whatever he's going to say, but it comes back, message undeliverable. Try again.
That frustration. Oh my gosh.
This happened right before you got on. I was trying to text you, and my text was coming up with a red exclamation point saying undeliverable. And you got the messages, but I was going, what do you mean undeliverable? What do you mean? And it happened for me real right before we started this. And so, you're looking at your communication. So he does it again. Of course, I want to send it again, just like I did. And lo and behold, no, he's not getting through. And so he realizes he needs more help. And there's no way to get help if he keeps going after Lizzy where he doesn't know she is. So he gives up his search for Lizzy and heads back to the Mage Guild Hall. And that in itself is kind of interesting because McDougal has found his way to the council. And they're all very excited about this. The phones have Martin and Aloris, who Lizzy has now been taken to the Hyssop and Sage. They have been fixing Lizzy's foot. Martin gives her a walking stick to help her. And this is a little bit part of Lizzy's transition. So if you pay attention to Lizzy and what she's looking like, now she's got a staff to go with her cloak and all of that. So she is starting this transformation to be more in like of what we think Calixta would be as well. And so Martin finally is able to call through and gets through. So we think the communication breakdown is over. The council is celebrating because now they know where the princess is. And Omen is watching from the fence outside, looking through the window. And he's the one there going, you fools. This is far too early to celebrate anything. You fools need to just keep your cool. And he flies off into the night sky. And so trying to keep that drama all built, I can remember, Kat, when we were here at this stage, we had already now, the light bulb went off on our puzzle. And we knew where we were really going to go to put all of these pieces together. And I'm like, I think there's only a couple chapters left. It didn't happen that way.
No, not at all.
My target on this book, you guys, was to write a novel in the 60 to 65,000 word area. And I thought, will I ever make it to 60,000? Will I ever get there? This book is 90,000 words. And most of that extra happened once we figured out the puzzle. So we flash back to the Hyssop and Sage, which is where Gorva used to be. And now they've got new owners, and the kids are suggesting, why don't you go down to the hangout, down to the basement, down to where you do your thing. And what I like about this is the kids, we discover that Craig carves, and he talked all about playing caves and towers on his speaksy. He talked all about this technical stuff, which our kids do today, but we gave Craig a hobby. So it was something other, and as a role model for kids. Don't spend all your life on this device.
Right.
There are other things in life to do, and Craig does, and he does it very well. But then Lizzy turns around and sees the big poster of the Ice Angels, and she knows who these people are. And they start talking about, oh, we got my mother and my father are crazy about the Ice Angels. They collect all this memorabilia and all of this. And she finally learns the name of the other two Ice Angels, which is Miona and Ginevra. And then, so do you like their music? Do you like their music? And now Lizzy is getting more and more on the spot. This is not where she's from. She didn't know about a speaksy. She's looking at this thing like, wow, I have a Princess telephone. You know, that's what I've got. And it has video and all of these things. And whenever they ask her if she knows the Ice Angels, she is panicked. She knows she's about to be found out. But before she has to answer, Craig is the one that goes, did you see her? Did you see Calixta in the park? Because they wanted to go out there and were not allowed. And they're wanting to know if she did. And she didn't because she was too short. But then they start showing the newsreel, right? The news clips.
Yeah.
Inspired. And she's looking at Calixta and seeing this scarred woman with, you know, hair flying everywhere and saying the same words. And she's panicking, you know, the princess is here, find her, go get her. And it really scares Calixta. I mean, sorry, it scares Lizzy to death. And it's also in this moment that they go, well, you know what she did? And she goes, no, I don't know what she did. She killed Ravel, the high mage. And Lizzy is now going back to the parlor where she learned about Ravel, but she didn't know what happened to him. Now she's starting to get how evil and mean this person is. She's learned about the Groaning Stones. Now she's learned about the death of the high mage Ravel. And the voice goes, well, you want to go see the stones? He goes, what do you mean? And it's like, because the tunnel is under there. The tunnel has been a pretty important part through this story as well. It's an undercurrent of things that are happening up above. And this undercurrent, but there is a little mystery here because I do describe in this particular area that this part of the tunnel doesn't look like the old part of the tunnel. So it should be an indicator that this was built at some other time rather than when the old tunnel was built. And that kind of plays into the story that I don't want to say too much about. But they arrive at the well and the boys are excited about this well. Lizzy's made a light too.
Oh yeah, big deal.
This is a huge big deal. It's part of the transformation.
Yeah.
Well, you can make a light, you're a mate. And she's like, ah! And so, you know, she remembers the words that Greta said, if you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you can't. So she just decides, if this is a fantasy, if this is a dream, I can do anything I want to.
Right.
And she just goes, light, Alama. And there it is. And they have a light. And when they arrive at the well, Lizzy peers over into the well, and with the ripples, she thinks she sees Calixta. This is that mirror. This is first, she says there's a staff. She's got red hair. She's got her cloak on. I mean, it's scary. And the boys are so spooked by it, but they don't turn back. They keep going and they make it up into the tower. And this is where they're doing all of this. And the boys want her to touch the two statues. And the boys are the ones that said, we've watched all the old clips and we've seen all this up in the tower. And that was Karina. And the guy that pulled her out of the window, that must have been Bartlett. This must be Karina and Bartlett. And Lizzy's sitting here freaking going, if that's the truth, and that's my mom and dad. And she passes out, which makes the light go away. The boys get her to come back. And that's when Omen arrives at the window. Says, try again. What do you mean I can't do it? Try again. And she ends up making this light and there's a conversation and she says, I'm not having anything to do with that evil, horrible person. And then lo and behold, what evil, horrible person are you talking about? And it's Calixta standing right there. And suddenly, I mean, the boys are shoot off, and now it's like Calixta and Lizzy. Why don't we just sit down and have a chat? Let's just sit down and have a chat, close the chapter, and then go to something else, because we want the audience to sit here and read and wonder what's going to happen with Calixta
Yeah.
and all of that.
Uh,
So I really, this is where the book really, to me, it becomes a page turner, I
Yeah.
guess. Now, that's wishful thinking for any author,
Of course.
but still. So I've had so much fun with this. And Kat, I mean, I think half of the fun was when we would just be on FaceTime or whatever for hours on end, just trying to come up with what next. And hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Are there any questions or comments before we say goodbye today that you would like to chime in about? I need to do
The drawing.
I'll do the drawing, and I do have Toy couldn't be there today. 71, number 71 on the
Yep.
list. And I can get to that. Open recent. Number 71, you guys, while you're typing your question, it's Aaron. It's Marcia, M-A-R-C-I-A, Marcia Aaron. Marcia Aaron. Okay. A page turner began for Karen Oliver when Lizzy was grabbed from behind.
Yeah.
Yes, and taken and picked up in the crowd.
That was good.
And that's exactly right. We don't know who that is. I will say, well, Kat, I'll let you talk about that. Who was it that picked her up, and how did we have fun with that?
Well, it was fun because we had so many options, right? We could have had Igri find her again. We could have had, Greta found her again and she's safe. We could have, and all these different roads. And when we finally came to the conclusion, we wanted it to be not safe. And so who would that be, and why would that be, and what would be said, and then where would that turn? And it's just similar to like when we knew we wanted action in the Calixta's Lair. We had all these ideas of scenes that could play out, and we had to go down that road mentally and play them out to the end to see where it would lead. And half of them were dead ends.
Yeah, there was a lot.
You got to abandon it and then go down another road,
And in this particular case, we had already months, if not years before, knew that there was going to be a couple in the apothecary.
Yes.
And we hadn't made it to the apothecary, other than the fact that we were there many years ago with this silver-haired, long-haired lady with a broken red pendant. And so this made sense to she's hurt. Where does she go? She goes to get fixed.
Right.
And at the apothecary, but we had her picked up by a bear. And this, because Lizzy, she's been so scared of bears, and surely bears are so mean. And then we gave the bear the name Violet. And I don't know, I just had so much fun talking about how we're going to make this happen, and how Lizzie's going to understand that. And she's caressed by the bear paw. So we end up using the name of the quilt block, with all of this. And
you remember when we first had her discovering this is how she meets the boys, right? And we had her first flying in over and seeing them in a graveyard working or whatever. We had all kinds of scenarios on how are they going to meet? They got to meet somehow, And
how was this family going to look? So this family that we've now met, it does play a major role in the story, and getting to that family. I think in our brains, in some of the earlier synopsises, we had them meeting that family way earlier on.
Yeah.
Lizzy was meeting those boys way
early on. Yeah.
And that didn't happen either.
Those are the kinds of things that you have to be willing to shuffle and edit. And it can be frustrating because you can fall in love with a scene or a character, and to have to abandon it can really be frustrating. But if it serves that's what I love about collaborating, though, because a lot of times I'm like, this is it. This is the best ever. And Ricky will read it and go, yeah, but, and I'll go,
but it really worked, and it was such a joy to do this with you, Kat. I mean, it really was, and I hope I never ramrodded anything too much. I was always thinking about the
No,
story,
no,
and
no.
I really loved when Kat would put her foot down and says, "We're not losing this. I'm not getting this one. You're gonna have to figure it out."
That's right.
We would figure it out. And the other thing about some of these ideas, I mean, who's to say that we don't have somebody in a graveyard digging in the in a future
It
sequel?
might come up later. Keep all your snippets, just like you do your fabric pieces. Keep it all.
Absolutely. You guys, thanks for being a little late with me today. I really appreciate the flexibility, and I apologize. I will be back on target. You guys are going to finish the book now, and when we next visit, we will do a little bit of a chapter wrap up and all of that. But mostly, I want to deal with the topics that are in the back. So I hope that you will join the discussion, because it's you that we want to talk about, talk to, and about, and we hope that you've enjoyed this journey with us this month. Get everybody read, tell your friends, read the book, read the book, read the book, read the book. We want lots of people reading. So thanks again for joining us. Kat, I hope you're doing okay. I'm in Dallas. The weather's nicer than in Colorado right now. And
No,
I've got 5 days
still
now.
in Florida, and it's beautiful.
5 days of taping. And as much as I have fallen in love with my beard, because when it's groomed, it looks good. But most of the time, it's just like a crazy
Like
wild
this.
man. Well, I wish I could put that in my beard and make it look really good. But apparently, I'm going to be trimming this back to the normal length probably in the next couple of hours. So,
Oh, for taping, huh?
so the next
Okay.
time you guys see me, I'll be more shorn. So, everyone, God bless you. Can you remind us the next webinar is 2 Mondays away. It is the 29th. We have 2 meetings left, Monday the 29th, and I went ahead and did April the 1st, even though it's not in March, because it just kept us on Monday and Thursday. So I will not see you next week, and I'm trying to put that each time that schedule is in the email that I send out. So Tammy, thank you for asking, and I hope to see you again when we come back. So everyone, God bless you. Have a wonderful weekend, and keep reading, because you're almost to the end. Cheers.
Bye.